Hello again, it's Noob, and I really hope you enjoy this video today. If, like me, you are just interested in, lock history, lock picking tools, those kind of things, then really keep watching because we're going to be picking a beautiful Chubb AVA or AVA cam lock using this beautiful and newly reissued Chubb AVA or AVA lockpick and decoder. And this was very kindly lent to me, and I genuinely mean that, very kindly lent to me by GJ Locks, who is one of the premier locksmith tool designers and makers in the UK. And for him to lend me this this tool, wow, that's all I can say. You know, for a locksmith to be lending a locksporter a very precise and pretty expensive tool. Generally, GJ Locks, I very much appreciate it. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to feature this isn't just so I can pick one of these Chubb AVAs or AVAs, because they are quite hard locks to pick. It's because this tool in particular has some amazing history to it. So this tool was originally designed in part by the famous Chris Belcher, who actually made an awful lot and innovated an awful lot of locksmith tools. And this is a reissue of Chris Belcher's original 2-in-1 pick and decoder. And GJ Locks has worked with Chris Belcher's estate to bring this back out to the locksmith and safesmith community because of such a big demand from, in particular, the safe picking community for this tool. So it's had a couple of tweaks to its design, so that it's got it's a bit easier to use. But other than that, it's essentially the same design that Chris Belcher made. So yeah, this tool does have a really cool bit of history. For those of you who are curious, and these are about £220 plus VAT. Which actually, considering the how much precision engineering goes into making one of these, I actually think it's a bargain. So if you are a locksmith or safesmith and you have cause to buy a professional tool like this, then please do go check out GJ Locks' website. Right. Anyway, as fascinated as I am by the history of this tool, I generally don't think there's anything else out there like it. Let's just have a quick look at these Chubb AVAs or Chubb AVAs. Now, I will do a separate video on how these work because they are absolutely fascinating, but in brief, I'll go through a couple of points. So first off, they sort of come in more or less 3 different variants as far as I can tell. The first and the most simple is a 9 wafer, and yet these are wafer locks, a 9 wafer cam lock. And these actually have ever so slightly smaller keyways, albeit that they work in exactly the same way as all the rest. And there you go. And they actually only have 2 types of wafer in 2 different orientations, albeit that those can be any one of those 4 combinations 9 times across the entire length of the key. So that's pretty secure. Also, the keyway has a small profile to it. I don't know whether you can tell, just at the tip of my finger there, there's a notch. And that's where, if you look down the key, I tried to find it. So on this side, you might just make out that there's a small cutaway on the highest cuts on that key. And that will align with that profile, allow you to put the key in one way, but not the other way. There we go. Can't do it. Has to go in this way. The other type of 9 wafer lock is something like this, and these are again like a cam lock, and once again they only use 2 of the 3 possible wafers, which can be in 2 different orientations, but the key is much bigger, and you'll see that the keyway is slightly offset, so you get slightly more of a round profile here than here, which means that you can put the key in not that way but this way. So again, it's got a very subtle profile to it, and again that can turn, and this is like a little bullet cam. Let's just compare those 2 keys for 1 second. and you'll see what I mean about the scale difference. Both 9 wafers, but there's a ever so slight difference in terms of the width of these 2 keyways, I guess, if you like. And lastly, we have things like this. Now these have 10 wafers in. This is a Chubb AVA or AVA padlock, and very, very awesome it is too. But look at the key on this. This is clearly more extreme in its bitting and very greasy, and that's because there is another wafer which actually needs a bitting which is slightly higher on the cuts to move them to the correct position. And again, I will do a follow-up video on how these actually work, but just so you know, there are 3 different types. I will be picking this one today, which has the same width of keyway as the padlock, but 9 instead of 10 wafers. What do I mean by wafers? Well, I have a little cam lock here which you can open quite nicely. Let's have a look inside, because I actually have cut this in half, and you'll see inside what's going on. So you have these wafers, and there you go, they are aligned to the shear line. So there we go, I've removed the key and I've just put the core back in the rear half of the lock, and you can see how there are cutaways in the body of the lock, top and bottom, to receive the wafers which are not at shear line and stop it from rotating round. So these wafers that stick below here will dig in to the bottom of the lock, for example, or at the top, and stop that rotating past a certain point, which is about there in this lock. I'm trying to get it to stick about there. If I put the key in, it will lift all these wafers to the correct shear line. There we go, and allow the whole thing to rotate. You can see that they are, if I take the whole thing off, you'll see how they are all flush with the shear line. So before we start picking one of these Chubb AVAs or AVAs, what we need to do is have a way of tensioning it. And we're going to tension on the back wafer, the 9th wafer, which means that you need a tension tip which is an exact replica of the key bitting at the 9th position. That will set that wafer at the shear line and force all the other wafers in the core to bind. Now, you have 3 different types. You have a 5:1 ratio, a 2:4, and a 3:3, and of course those can be inversed depending on the way round that the wafers are in the lock at position 9. So how can you tell, without trying all 3 of them in both orientations, which way it works? Well, actually it is by a process of elimination. The first thing is it's a cam lock, so we don't need the 5:1 ratio, this one here, because it doesn't have that wafer set in the lock. So we're left with the 3 and 3 and the 2 and 4. And there's 2 sort of ways to do this, but I'll show you the longhand way, which is to set this to the 8th position. There are 9, there you go, but 8th because you want the tip to be the 9th, to replicate the bitting at the 9th position. So there you go, tighten that up, pop this in, and you're doing it both way round. You're looking for an increment of 1, so turn it and take, so this is the pick tip. You're going to turn that counterclockwise and then turn the drive tip or the tension tip clockwise centrally and see where it comes down to. So I've got a reading of 4 here according to this line. Take that out, turn it round, that's the drive tip, put that back in, pick tip in the same position again. So put that in, pick tip counterclockwise, drive tip, and I've got a reading of well, 4 again. So I know that this is probably not the right tip because it isn't incrementing that reading by any value. So I can just take that out, swap over to the 2:4 ratio tip, which I happen to know is the right one, and I know that anyway because I have the key. And if you actually align this with the key like that, you see, align it, and you'll see that that key there replicates the bitting at the 9th position. Now the tip of the key looks like it might engage with something and tension from the back. Actually, it doesn't. This is just goes into a recess at the back of the lock, which allows the key to locate centrally, but otherwise it doesn't actually provide tension to the lock at all. Some people have exploited that recess by putting in something like wood or rubber on a tension tip to grip the back of the lock, and that actually can work too. Anyway, slightly less reliable than this. So just put in this, make sure it's again at position 8, put in the 2 to 4 tip. Tighten it up, pop it in, all the way to the back, counterclockwise on the pick tip, and take a reading, and we are somewhere just over 1, so near 2. Take it out, turn it the other way up, pop it in, all the way, and take a reading. Get it right. There we go, and it's just over 2 in the lock. So that's indicating to me that that is probably the right one anyway. You can tell because when you put the right tension tip in, the wafers actually get dragged, they're binding. So that's another quick way of telling. If you just try one of the tips and the wafers are dragging, then you know it's the right one. Right, onto the picking. First thing to do, then we apply some tension using the drive tip, but you don't force it, you don't need to. It's not that kind of picking. You're not using this as like in a 2-in-1 where you're applying tension to the lock, binding up the wafers, and feeling for the binding wafer. It isn't a mechanism that works like that. So what you're actually doing is you're going to move all the wafers to the left hand side like this, all the way, by keeping the pick central in the keyway, and you should be able to feel without tension on that you can move wafers left and right in the lock, even if they can be a little sticky at times. So just bear that in mind, that they can be a little bit sticky. Okay, right, so enough of that. Move everything over to the left. You can tell they're over to the left because they will provide some counter rotation on the pick when you hold the drive tip clockwise and then move the pick tip counterclockwise. Go along, make sure everything's over to the left. It's important because you're going to be moving things left to right and measuring the gap, so to speak. So, and we're on position 8, so we've got a movement there of about 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think that that's already in the right position. So we're looking at increments of 6 between the two tips. So this is 4 to 1. That isn't 6. That's so it's 5 to 1. That isn't 6. That's more like 4. So going to just back off the tension and see if I can. There you go. So gone from 2 now down to 1. So that's 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just over actually. So I'm gonna leave that. Next one, next wafer position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and you're basically just going along and measuring, and if the increment is too short, then rotate the wafer round a bit and to the next position, and you will feel that happen. And then hopefully you'll get an open once you moved all the wafers, so they all have an increment of around 6 markings. That isn't so good. Back off. Try that. That's better. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a bit stiff. Oh, and we've got an open. Look at that. So I can tell I've got an open because when I remove this, you can see that this button here at the back on that bullet lock is retracted. So there you go. So I know that this is now open. There isn't any more visual indicator in this lock than that, but we have just moved all of the wafers from the left to the right, trying to find an increment of 6, and there we go. We have an open on this beautiful cam. There you go. I just moved it back, and I can, as long as the wafers don't, I managed to do, oh no, there you go. As long as the wafers don't slide back into unlocked position, you can move this back and forth a bit. There you go, look at that. Once I remove this though, and scramble the wafers up, there they go, and then I put the pick tip back in, I shouldn't be able to open it by turning the drive tip at all, because it's now locked back up. You'd actually need the key or to repick it. Once you have picked it, you can actually take measurements using that tool as well, and actually find the key bitting, which I think is really, really cool. Just apply a little bit of maths to the sequence of readings, and yeah, you can actually work out the key bitting. So if you were a locksmith trying to create a new key for a Chubb AVA or AVA that didn't have one, then of course you could go about cutting one based on measurements from this tool. Very cool. So yeah, that's the first ever Chubb AVA lock that I've ever picked. So that's a full size 9 wafer bullet cam. Thank you again to GJ Locks for lending me this incredible precision tool. And again, I just want to say, isn't it really awesome that it's been brought back onto the market through the actions of GJ Locks and Chris Belcher's estate. I just think that's a really nice story. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.